We all know that compliance is getting more complex. Most organizations are still managing it in a fragmented way. Although it's getting so complex, every new regulation, framework, customer requirements, or an audit request creates another layer of work. And teams are asked to prove the same things again and again, but in a slightly different format to accommodate to all those different requests. That usually means spreadsheets, duplicate evidence requests, manual mapping, disconnected control libraries, and a lot of time that is spent translating between frameworks instead of actually improving the program that you have in place. And Cyturus changed that. Instead of managing compliance framework by framework, Cyturus help organization govern from the control layer so you can understand what you already have, map it to what is required or requested, and identify the true gaps and maturity opportunities that you have while maintaining what we call the living control set that evolves as requirement change. What is a living control set? A living control set is basically a subset of what your organization as of today define as good. Those are the set of controls that are yours to define based on your obligations, based on your requirements, based on all the things that your leadership thinks you should have in order to maintain operations, which is a subset of a master control library that has more than 1,500 controls to choose from, again, based on those obligations. We call it a living control set because, as the word indicates, it's a live system, which means you can change it, you can monitor the changes, you can go back in time and see the progression of your program. So let's take a look at the Cyturus tool, the CRT. When I look into the CRT, I am not starting with a checklist. I'm starting with the organization control environment. And I do that by using the living control set. This is important because controls are the operational foundation of security, privacy, risk, and compliance. And frameworks may change, regulation may expand, customer obligations may shift, but the question remains the same. What controls do we have? What do they satisfy? And where do we want or need to improve? So in order to do that, I am utilizing the living control set dashboard. This is where I would start. What you're seeing in front of you is that living control set of your own, that subset of controls of our 1,500 plus different controls that you can choose from. Most organizations are not starting with zero, or they're not starting from zero. They already have policies, they already have procedures, technical safeguards, evidence, risk activities, and of course, compliance work in place. Cyturus Help takes that existing program and map it against our 1,500 plus controls. So you get a clear understanding of what your current situation in within hours. We do that using AI capabilities that allows you to bring in all of your documentation and have a very quick as is state based on your documentations. Of course, trash in, trash out, which means if your policies are not reflecting what is the reality of what you're doing, that is going to be a false positive that you're doing something. So the importance is when you get started to make sure that your documentations are actually a reflection of what you're doing in reality. The goal in that first stage is not to create more work. The goal is just to reveal the value of the work that you already been doing. And we do that by using a concept that is called conformity assessments. Conformity assessment allows you, once you have established your living control set, to evaluate yourself against any one of the 250 plus frameworks that we have in the tool. You can see exactly what the delta is, exactly where you are missing, what gaps you have, and what you're already doing that can be reused for that framework. That is the power of starting from the living control set when you're working on compliance. Same rules applies for risk management. When you're starting from here, you can dive into a specific control, and basically the system will take you into all the consolidated information regarding that control. That includes frameworks that it is accommodating, risks that are related to that, and threats that are related to that. So you can have a very clear and effective start to understand all the moving pieces that are related to this control. As you can see, there's a lot of tabs, there's a lot of separation in here to allow each and every one of you with your role to see the view that you need to see. We're not forcing you to change the way you're doing things. You can still manage risk separated from compliance. That's not a problem. This is why we have dedicated environment, which we're going to see in a second. But the idea is that when you want to understand the impact of the control, the impact of retiring a control, the impact of maturing a control, you can see exactly all the moving pieces that are related to that control. Cyturus uses a control-based approach supported by a common control framework. We call it a master control library. For example, the Secure Control Frameworks, or NIST 853, are used as the common control layer, allowing multiple frameworks and requirements to connect back to that shared set of control. This is where the model becomes really powerful, because instead of treating every requirement as a separated task, CRT helps organization understand control relationship across frameworks. One control may satisfy multiple obligations. One gap may affect multiple requirements. One improvement may reduce multiple risk and advance readiness across several compliance objectives. And that is what we're aiming to do. The living control set is not a static spreadsheet or one-time compliance artifact. It is the organization evolving control foundation. Think about it as your control architecture. As regulations change, frameworks are added, business grow, the living control set helps team quickly understand what changes and what is already covered and what is requiring actions. What are the things that we're maintaining? This helps you centralize everything that you're doing. So when you're asking for a piece of evidence, you ask it once, it is a link everywhere that might impact. And this way, that one update of that piece of evidence or one update of that piece of policy is impacting everything, the risks that are associated with that, the controls in those compliance requirements that are leveraging that, and so on and so on. So you always have that one source of truth. That is the actual power of the living control set, is your true source of your reality, of the things that you're actually actively engaging in, and not just to pass an audit, what you actually are doing. Once the existing program is mapped, Cyturus helped make the gap visible. These are not just checklist gap, those are control gap. That means that a team can see where the program is strong, where requirements are partially covered, and where remediation is needed. Let's take a look. We have established here a living control set based on a very basic approach, just the really dental cleanup, as we like to say, controls that every organization should have in place. And the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to press on the create conformity, which we're going to start with a conformity analysis. What we're going to do is we're going to select that new requirements that came across. CMMC is like the thing that everyone's talking about. We're also the designated tool for CMMC, top secret. We're going to start by evaluating CMMC level 1. CMMC level 1 has a subset of requirements. What we're going to do is we're going to initiate this analysis. And the first thing that the system is going to ask us is, do you want to leverage all the information from the living control set, or do you want to start from a clean sheet? You can, in this stage, decide that you want to inherit all of the information, but I know that right now we're just evaluating. We're not creating any assessment. We're not starting to do this program. This is just, one salesperson that reached out to us to ask about CMMC level 1 and can we meet those requirements. So this is what I'm doing right now. So therefore, I'm going to say no, and I will continue. Once I have created that, what the system has done, it took all of the requirements coming from CMMC and it is compared it with everything that we're already doing and is established in the living control set and provided me with a delta. What are the things that I would need to add in order to really accommodate to all of those requirements? This gives me a very easy way to understand what are my gaps and what is going to be the challenges of that framework. We can see exactly the information of why this control and what is the actual requirement coming from CMMC this control is going to accommodate. This gives you an easy click of a button gap analysis to any new requirements that comes in, making gap fast and visible. So now you know exactly what we need to do. This is especially valuable for organizations that are preparing for growth and have a lot of multiple obligations coming their way. One great use case is research institute in universities that keep on getting all this new request that comes with obligations to conduct research. Those organizations will have their compliance team evaluate those organizations and expecting to get answers within hours. In reality, sometimes those efforts take weeks to give that answer. With the tool, you can get an answer within 5 minutes. Understanding what your gaps are, understanding what is the reality of that, and of course, if you have experience, you can fairly easily understand what does that mean in terms of my environment to implement that. It doesn't take away your experience and your understanding. We're not trying to replace any human in this process. Everything is to leverage your expertise and to allow you to use them in the best and most effective way. Next, what happens when those gaps are visible? Now that we have decided to move ahead and create this framework and actually start to work on the living control set upgrade to include CMMC level 1 requirements, you can see that my controls have increased. We had 68 controls, now we have 103 controls that are added as a result of that new program. I am now able to go into each one of those controls that I have in my environment and understand their obligations and the way that they are leveraged. As a result, we will see that in certain controls, we have a new icon that was added. That icon reflects that this is used for an active compliance assessment. In here, I will see that I have a new tab that indicates that this is leverage for an engagement. In a press of a button, I can now see exactly how that control is being leveraged, discussed, approached in that CMMC assessment that a dedicated team is working on. It gives me immediate visibility of what is going on. That team has its own dedicated assessment, which is the traditional approach to GRC that you're used to, with a checklist of things that they need to do in order to accommodate to CMMC. But the real power is the visibility. I have a clear understanding of what they're doing. I have a clear understanding of how they're leveraging the existing control and what is new, reducing duplication of evidence requests and making the audit preparation more effective and more efficient. In the dashboard, you will see all the different modules. Those are the dedicated areas for the team to work on. Assessment management is designed for the compliance team. A third-party risk management is designed for vendor assessment, managing your channel. Policy manager is where policy lives. They are leveraged in multiple areas, and therefore they allow you to manage the entire life cycle of policies. Risk is where the risk team lives and work. This is where they analyze risk and threats, and those will be associated with controls in the living control set, with assessment objectives for those compliance obligation, with third parties that have risk associated with them, and incidents that we're tracking. All of that allows you to have a very clear understanding of the relationship between the risk and the threats to those objectives that you're monitoring, compliance related, internal related, or third party, external related. Maturity management is all about maturity in your program. This is where you close gaps. This is where you work on your tasks. This is where you connect to your ticketing system, and so on and so on. This is really where the deep work is being done. It also where the deep work of those compliance related documentations that you need to work on comes into play. For example, SSP, for example, POEM, and so on and so on. All those compliance related complex documentations that need to be prepared. The pretty thing about those is that all those documentations are actually live documents. They are taking advantage of all that information that you're creating everywhere else in the tool and becoming virtual documents, which is our patent, that is allowing you to ensure that those documentations are always up to date and showing the reality of where you are today with the capability of tracing back. So if you are following an obligation like CMMC or FedRAMP that forces you to document in the SSP every time that you are making a change, that becomes a non-effort because it's part of your process. That changes are created automatically when you update that in your control environment. The largest value that the CRT provides is helping organization move from reactive compliance to compliance as an outcome of your governed readiness. Cyturus help organization turn compliance complexity into control-based clarity by mapping the existing programs, leveraging a common control framework, or what we call a master control library, and maintaining a living control set. The result is a program that is easier to understand, easier to maintain, and better prepared for what comes next. That is control-based governance with Cyturus. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.